Hello, everyone. We'll just give everybody a minute or so, settle in, get ready. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Chong Lei. I am a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Bitsight, and I will be your host for today's conversation. Before we get started, please drop a note in the chat and let us know where you are joining from, or answer the question that Nilufar put in the chat, which is what's your biggest challenge for the team today and for the TPRM program. We always have people dialing from across different regions, industries, and stages of their third-party risk program. So it's just great to see who is it in the room. I'm seeing forced party can be your biggest challenge, vendor indifference, too many alerts. I definitely feel that for you. The disparity amongst a variety of tools used to perform risk assessment and procurement onboarding to completion of assessment. Yes, that's true. Please keep those notes in. A part of the sort of the conversation I really enjoy for this Bitsight series is not only that we are sharing what we know the best and what we learned the latest with you, but folks are also sharing their insights, chatting with each other. So I really enjoy the sense of community here. But without further ado, let's get this started. Today's session is called Doomed or Prepared: How Frontier AI Models Reshape TPRM. So this is intentionally provocative, as you can imagine, but there are two very different ways to look at the impact of frontier AI on cybersecurity today. On the one side, I hope you hear this a lot and not too tired of it, but models of like Mythos are making it easier for attackers to identify, vulnerabilities, scale their campaigns, and move from, discovery to exploitation much, much faster. At the same time, organizations are becoming more independent on an increasingly complex ecosystem of suppliers, technologies, and service providers. But this is not simply a story about defenders like you falling behind. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this conversation. Could we though use the same advance that accelerate attacks like this to help security and risk teams discover exposure faster, prioritize more intelligently, and respond with greater speed? Today's conversation is about that. It's no longer, the old topic of whether TPRM has changed. It is really about, will your program be prepared to operate at this new speed? And I have two really good speakers for that today. But before we jump into that, quickly, a couple of housekeeping notes just to maximize, what you can take away today. Today's session is being recorded. We will share the link afterward. Please use the Q&A panel throughout the conversation. So it's actually located right next to your chat. So it's on your right side of the window browser. Chat is where you engage with us as well as everybody else here in the room. Docs is the free resource that we provide. Please download them. There are some really good reports there. And then Q&A is where you can type in your questions, where we will answer after the content that we share with you today. You don't have to wait last minute to type your question. Please do tap them whenever it comes up, so we have the time and make sure we address as much as possible. One last thing. So if sometimes it's easier to engage with a real human and just get to see how Bitsight can help you. If that's what you like to have, there is a button called Talk to a Bitsight Expert in bright orange color on the top right of your window corner. So just click that if you want to, and it will take to where you need to be. All right, now let's jump in. I'm really excited about the speakers today because they will bring exactly the perspective we need for the topic. So first, we have Amanda Ravanesi, the Director of Product Management for Third-Party Risk Management at Bitsight. Amanda has spent her entire career at this intersection of technology, security, and risk, which is honestly where the most complex problems live today. So lucky you, Amanda. She's worked directly with TPRM and GRC teams at every stage, from operational trenches to broad room strategy. What makes Amanda's perspective so valuable is that she's watching, the TPR market transformed over years. She's definitely going to cover that. And she's seeing firsthand what separates organizations that adapt from ones that get stuck in old playbooks. So Amanda really knows what resiliency actually looks at scale. And joining Amanda is Emma Stevens. So Emma is a threat intelligence researcher at Bitsight with over 10 years in cyber threat intelligence, OSINT, and dark web analysis. Emma later spends her time tracking the real activities of threat actors and groups, really looking at what is actually happening in terms of versus what we think is happening. Emma's work in the underground gives us a real data on attack patterns, cascading vulnerabilities, and how quickly the threat landscape is evolving. So that ground truth is critical to what we're going to discuss today. Emma and Amanda, thank you both for being here. Just really quick, the reason that the background of Emma and Amanda probably already say it itself, but really the point of bringing the two experts to this conversation is that the TPR world is at an inflection point. The frontier AI models, I'm trying really hard not to say AI too many times at this session, but the models are changing the game, not just for attackers, but for defenders like you too. So the old playbooks around vendor management don't account for what we're now seeing. So we really need to understand two things. One is the threat reality, which is Emma's domain, and then how to operationalize the response, and that's Amanda's. So we're going to talk about that. I know I'm doing a lot of talking. Bear with me just for one more minute, and I'll hand over to the real expert here. But if this is the first time or the relatively new times you're joining us, just really quick, give you a sense of who we are and what we do. So Bitsight is a cyber risk intelligence company. We help security and risk leaders identify exposure, prioritize investment, and communicate risk to the stakeholders. We also make sure that all those grounded to taking actions to reduce the real risk. Today, more than 35,000 organizations and 50,000 users rely on Bitsight, and our network includes visibility into approximately 75,000 vendors. I know firsthand this number is ever growing. So the scale really matters for today's conversation because third-party risk cannot be understood through a single questionnaire analysis or point-in-time assessment anymore. It requires a broader view of the ecosystem, security performance, business criticality, emergent vulnerabilities, so on, which Amanda will dive into soon. But just the intersection of risk data, threat intelligence, and business context is where we'll be spending much of our time today. Okay. So without further ado, I would like to quickly hand over to Emma. Again, Emma is as she's doing day-to-day the research on the underground, there's a lot that we can learn from, just really understand what is happening in terms of activities, what we can learn, and really quintessentially, what is the logic behind those attacks? And from there, we can learn how we respond. Emma, please take away.
Thanks, Chungli. So during my research for the State of the Underground for 2026 and then further into AI, I saw a lot of changes with threat actors and kind of evolving around the security landscape. So we saw a lot around Mythos and frontier AI in general with the tidal wave of vulnerabilities that are coming out. Threat actors now have unlimited vulnerabilities at their fingertips because AI is allowing them to be able to find these vulnerabilities significantly faster, which has closed the exploit window from the time the vulnerability is identified until the time a threat actor can leverage that vulnerability. I also saw that ransomware payments are down. Part of that reason is because of new laws and regulations forbidding the payment of ransomware or ransoms, but also because companies have stronger backups, security has increased, and companies are becoming more and more aware of what threat actors are doing. But just like security researchers who are studying how to make themselves more secure, threat actors are studying how to get around these new security approaches. So we're seeing threat actors look into large blast radius domino type effect attacks. So they're looking at your supply chain. They're figuring, well, if I can take this one company down and they have 70 customers that I can hit from this one takedown, I have a really big impact, and I'm increasing the likelihood that they're going to pay that ransom because it's impacting not just them, but their customers as well. They're counting on the idea that the cost of downtime is going to be more expensive than it's going to be to simply pay their ransom. We also saw a 360% increase in exposures for AI services year over year. So the attack surface is expanding as threat actors are looking into ways to get around these new security regulations that we've implemented. So like I alluded to, threat actors are looking to hit you where it hurts. They're looking to go after your important vendors. They're looking to go after industrial control systems and operational technology and critical infrastructure. So they're thinking, if I can hit you and I can take you down for a week, it might end up costing you more in lost revenue, in legal fines, and lost clientele, or it can cost you a little bit less just to pay that ransom and make it go away quietly. One big example is the Colonial Pipeline, which was in Northern America on the East Coast. A ransomware group out of Russia hit the pipeline, and it impacted 50 million people and took away gas accessibility across the entire East Coast. So the initial ransom payment ask here was $4.4 million. The company originally did not end up paying that ransom, and they were down for about a week. It's estimated that they lost $20 million in revenue and impacted 50 million people. And they ended up paying that $4.4 million ransom on top of that lost revenue. So threat actors are playing into this. They're playing into, there's gonna be a lot of pressure if we take you down, if we take down these critical vendors, not only pressure from your clients from a legal perspective, but also from how much money you're losing with that downtime. So again, we're seeing threat actors trying to figure out how they can hit you and kind of force you to pay that ransom payment to get around the fact that less and less companies are actually ending up paying that ransom payment. We also saw a 368% increase in the general cost of ransom. So it went up to $60,000 for the general ransom payment request. But again, the total payments being paid out have gone down by 66%, in part due to laws and regulations, but also because companies are having better backups. So cannot stress enough how important it is to know your vendors, know who's interested in them, what kind of threat actors are looking at them, what the threats to those industries are, and how you can work with vendors to make sure that you're more secure and to keep them from potential breaches. Okay, so with Mythos and Frontier AI, we're seeing that there is a massive ability for threat actors to find vulnerabilities quicker, but not every single vulnerability is going to impact every single business. You're not possibly going to have every application or every vulnerability be able to impact you. So attackers aren't looking at every single weakness. They are looking at the weaknesses that are going to cause that domino effect. They're thinking from the point of, if I hit this, how many other companies can I hit because of this? Or what point can I prove? We have seen throughout 2025 and 2026, as the geopolitical landscape tensions are increasing, we're seeing that threat actors are doing it because of geopolitical reasons, because of financial reasons, and because of government reasons as well. So if we think about all the geopolitical things going on right now, we're seeing a huge increase in threat actors that are known as hacktivists, so geopolitically motivated or ideologically motivated, targeting perceived adversaries of theirs. We're also seeing government-sponsored APT groups, advanced persistent threats, start targeting adversarial nations in order to kind of cause mass disruption. One example was Raptor Train out of China. This was a massive multi-tiered bot that compromised routers, cameras, DVRs, small office technologies, and IoT devices. This was linked to China's Flax Typhoon, which is a government-sponsored advanced persistent threat group. So this was used to disguise malicious activity and support reconnaissance, exploitation, disruptive activity against government, military, telecommunications, technology, and other critical infrastructures. This botnet was disrupted in September 2024, but that was after it had impacted 200,000 devices worldwide and had been active for 4 years. So knowing the geopolitical implications of your vendors and knowing who's targeting them is going to help you as well. Another one we saw was the Move It campaign. This one was massive. It impacted 91 million people. It was originally discovered in June of 2023, I believe. But it had been going on before that, and then it went into late 2023. So even though people were aware of the Move It vulnerability, patching was not keeping up with the rate of which threat actors were actively targeting companies. When I was on CLOP, the threat actor behind Move It's dark web leaks, I saw one of my vendors on there. And I reached out to my GRC team. I said, have you heard from this vendor? They were on CLOP's leak site in terms of Move It. We reached out to the vendor, and the vendor didn't know at that point that they had been impacted by the Move It breach. So breaches can be quiet. So being able to track who's targeting your vendor, which threat actors are targeting them, how skilled these threat actors are, and knowing which vulnerabilities can possibly impact you and your vendors is going to help you stay safe. So we're seeing, again, a massive shift towards the perimeter, trying to hit your vendors to get that domino effect. And then going beyond just the typical financial reasons, we're seeing geopolitical and the government reasons as well. So being able to track your vulnerabilities, see who's targeting you, who's targeting your vendor, and what that means to you is going to help. So prioritization is going to be huge in this case, knowing, is this a small threat actor who historically hasn't been super active or super successful in their attacks, or am I going up against a group like Akira, who is known to pivot and known to be very successful in their attacks? That's going to kind of help you prioritize which vendors you need to be looking at first.
Appreciate the insight, Emma. And this is kind of the day-to-day question between Emma and the broader group of us. We're always saying that those discoveries are both fascinating and super scary. But what I'm hearing from Emma's research and the broader team is that the silver lining is really to understand that how attacker pick their targets, or what's the logic behind it, so that using that as sort of the guideline to prioritize how we defend our system. And I think that's kind of what Emma was alluding to, that even though attackers now have a lot of more technologies, right, to sort of accelerate their attacks, identify vulnerabilities, defenders can have the similar logic and the technology too, so that we can move at attacker speed. So really, lethal effect isn't all bad news. If we think about the same power can help us as well. Now the question is how? So I'm going to hand it over to Amanda and share more in terms of how we operationalize the supply chain resiliency.
Thanks, Changlu. Like Emma just alluded to, there is a lot of new waves of different types of risks, and it's happening at speeds beyond imaginable that we've seen years ago. And that's changing on a day-to-day basis. So what we want to walk through here is really what we're hearing from the analysts, from the market, from clients like yourself and our customers around what is the preparation needed, or how are they shifting their mindset to a new supply chain resilience view of managing risk across your ecosystem. So we want to talk about this evolution and evolving from, actually, I saw it come through in one of the questions leading into this, is restructuring, reframing your program, moving and evolving from a compliance-led focus to this resilience-led, and building out that view in this a threat-driven model way of thinking. So we'll dig into this here, and then we'll go ahead and demo some of the product capabilities that we're bringing to life to help combat these challenges as well. So first and foremost, the fundamental shift is really focusing on the critical pillars of what does it mean to have a threat-informed supply chain resilience focus. And it's really focusing on these major pillars here. Applying continuous ecosystem visibility, making sure that you have a continuous view of your supply chain risk, leveraging that threat-informed prioritization practice. And we'll walk through a couple of examples as to why this is so important, but this is really about harmonizing your data set, making sure that you have a diverse set of data. I like to call it the triangulation around that exposure data, that threat intelligence data, all of that threat informed information that Emma was just talking about, that real world activity that is happening here and now. And lastly, bringing it all center to your business. That business criticality is the most critical piece, I would say, to making this information about you and your organization. And then lastly, with that, it really sets you up to practice more of an efficient, selective vendor remediation process. We know the scale in which the ecosystems are growing are unwieldy and, quite frankly, unmanageable. And we'll talk a little about more in the shift in mindset, how to apply these practices. But we have to think about using the tools and technologies we have to be smarter in the ways that we're approaching the program to run greater efficiencies. All of this is underpinned with AI assisted discovery, utilizing AI technologies to help you function at a different speed and scale than ever before, automation and reporting. But if we don't set up the foundation in place first, we run the risk of just automating a naive approach of, and what I mean by that is more of the static mindset and approach to monitoring vendors in this ecosystem against the dynamic landscape of risk that Emma just talked about. Shifting motivations, dynamic nature of the behaviors and the end results of attackers that is not static. And if we don't pair that dynamic view of threat attack with how we want to defend, we'll have an uneven playing field. And so what we want to talk about next is kind of putting this into practice and thinking about ways for your program to think differently about this approach. So I mentioned it before, but fundamentally, this is really the mindset shift. We see all of our programs have, and we hear from our customers, and we've seen it in the market too, that TPRM programs spin up, and where we've all are shifting from is really where a lot of the programs begin. They begin with trying to inventory all of their vendors, understand who's who, just wrap your arms around that landscape. And then as quickly as possible, run through all of the cyber assessments. Do everything we can to understand what risk they're about to bring into our business. And spend so much time trying to get our arms around what that risk looks like. As a result, sometimes we're fitting this model of a one-size-fits-all vendor assessment approach because we're trying to get through what we can. As a result of that, oftentimes we find ourselves ignoring the fact that risk can be dynamic and is dynamic. And so we don't necessarily set up the programs to have visibility or the proper level of visibility into the drift or changes in risk from the controls that we first assess that vendor at on day one. This really comes down to some of the processes that we've put in place rely specifically on vendor risk snapshots. And it's not introducing that diversity of enriched data set to help us understand what is actively being targeted. And so we know the landscape, the risks are changing from threat activities, behaviors, and vulnerabilities, and AI assisted technologies. The world is different. We really need to focus on how can we shift into this resilient mindset. And that's where we see a lot of our customers working toward and building new programs around. Managing the supply chain risk the same way they manage their own ecosystem and the same way they manage their own attack surface. The reality is here and now, this is a fundamental extension of your own attack surface. So what does that mean? The same way you need to know all of your own assets and how they are exposed to the internet and the impact that they may have as risk to be introducing things into your own organization, you need that same level of continuous visibility into your ecosystem. That's about understanding not just who your vendors are, but how they are performing, how their security processes are in place on an ongoing basis, because their perimeter is your perimeter. With that, it's also integrating into automated response workflows and automating those response workflows really based on this last bullet point here of that diverse set of data input, that we want to make sure things don't just go faster, but that we're applying the right level of intelligence and thought, and so that we're well informed in the processes that we want to build at scale. And so it's about helping to automate workflows with enriched context and data to help you make the best decisions in the moment that you can. And that diversity of data is what we were anchoring in on before. It's about harmonizing the business context, that security performance of the vendor and the organization, and pairing that with the threat intelligence, the real world threat activity that's happening here and now. And so I think what we'll do next here is go through an example to help paint the picture around the importance of kind of thinking more in this threat minded exercise to show in practice how involving a diverse set of data can really help inform your prioritization. Okay, so bear with us as we walk through this, but I think it's a good explanation and presentation of what we're describing here. So what we want to help you understand is let's focus on a way in which we can help to prioritize what we want to go after, fix or remediate or have conversations with our vendors on through an attacker's lens. And so making sure we have the same amount of context and perspective that they have in what's happening in the real world. So you've got two vendors, A and B. And when you kind of first go through the evaluation of where their risk lies, they seem equally as critical. So the first element we'll bring forward would be, okay, what's the exposure? What is that finding? What is that issue that we think is driving risk that we need to go jump on? They seem the same, an open port within a database. Kind of a dumbed down version of kind of the illustration of risks here. But all right, there's a moment of exposure across these two vendors, and they're both critical. They're both considered critical vendors. We peel a layer back even further. We say, well, why are they critical vendors? Well, let's look at the business context. What are they doing for our organization? If you go ahead next. They're housing PIA information. They're supporting a customer-focused effort, and they're supporting payroll, internal employee level data. And so what we're seeing here is they have the same exposure, the same tiering of vendor. They have the same level of critical access to data that we find to be PII and ones that we care about protecting in the same way. But it's really this last piece that makes the most informed decision on where to focus. And let's break down their industry, the services in the region, and what is the threat activity layered into that space. And all of a sudden, they're not equal any longer. One, vendor A is financial services, and it's operating in an industry that's low risk, doesn't have a lot of threat activity, and it's in seemingly, untargeted place at the moment. When we look over at vendor B, we learn that they're in an industry that is highly targeted and they're operating out of a region that has a lot of threat activity. There is just a lot going on right now in that moment that, all things equal, vendor B's odds of being victim increases drastically due to the nature of that industry, the region in which they're operating out of, and the current activity we see across the threat landscape of actors looking to actively exploit that type of finding or exposure that they have access to. And so at the end of the day, it's that last layer there where the threat context can help you break that tie in determining where to focus your time. And now when you're looking at 2 vendors, it might seem like a mute point. But when you're looking at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 vendors, and you're scaling across a truly extended ecosystem, this type of thought and process of including a harmonized view of data set helps you to build those automations and operations at a different scale and level where you're beginning to build a program, as Changlu mentioned, that is built to defend against the same type of attacker lens, because we have that view in the picture. We know where they're focusing or how they're operating, what types of exposures they're going after, the industries, the regions, and it's really bringing all of that data to influence your decision process. So this was a classroom tabletop exercise example, right? But Emma, you've done a lot of different research, and I think you two have some real world examples where you've seen this happen in practice.
Yeah, definitely. So to understand how to prioritize your vendors, you need to kind of think like a threat actor, which isn't super intuitive to us because we're not threat actors, but understanding their core motivations and what they are trying to get out of attacking your vendors is going to help you choose who to prioritize. So one of the examples I brought up earlier is hacktivists. So these are groups that are politically, ideologically, or religiously motivated. Their ideologies and motivations are very important to them. So these groups are not groups that are likely to stop if they get deterred by an endpoint detection response system. One of those groups that is actively targeting vendors and companies in Ukraine is called No Name 05716. They are not government sponsored, but they are a group that is pro-Russia and has said in their manifesto that they are going to target anyone seen as supporting Ukraine or doing business with anyone who is seen as supporting Ukraine. So that doesn't just mean that this company supports Ukraine. That means this company does business with a vendor who is perceived as supporting Ukraine. That could make you a target for a group like No Name. So if one of your vendors is in Ukraine and that you're seeing active chatter about them or about a potential vulnerability, then that vendor would probably go up higher on my list. Another thing is knowing what kind of data these vendors have access to. Do they have access to emails, or do they have access to public health information or social security numbers or banking information? So understanding the implications of if this vendor were to get breached, how big of a fallout would that be in terms of what kind of information is leaked? How integrated is this vendor into our systems? Do they have a lot of access into our proprietary data? And if that were to get leaked, would that impact us? So kind of deciding like, what information does this vendor have access to? How likely are they to get breached by this group? And who's targeting them? What are their motivations? So you have the ransomware groups as well, which are financially motivated groups. One of the most well-known groups, Scattered Spider, is comprised of 14 to 18-year-olds, and they are making a lot of money, so they don't have a lot of reason to stop targeting. So groups like those, if you know they're targeting vendor B, and then you're probably going to want to look at that group because you're going to say, well, this group isn't going to be deterred very easily. I need to prioritize vendor B versus vendor A, who's maybe being targeted by a group who is known for either smaller attacks or not as successful attacks. Maybe the group looking at vendor A is known for token torching or denial of wallet attacks, where they're simply going to run up your finance bill and be a nuisance. So knowing threat actor context will really, really help you prioritize which ones of these companies you want to prioritize as well. So an example would be MoveIt. that is a file transfer application, and it has access to a lot of data. So if you know you have a vendor who uses a system like MoveIt that has access to a lot of critical data, then you're going to want to prioritize that vendor, especially because MoveIt went on for months and it would continue to be exploited because it was working for Clop. Clop was having success. They had no intention of stopping. They were making money and they were proving their point. Clop is generally perceived as a pro-Russia group, and that was part of their motivation in the MoveIt breach. And then the Ukrainian example refers to a tax company in Ukraine that was targeted because they were Ukrainians. They were targeted by a pro-Russia group and because they had access to PII. So considering all angles of who's targeting you from a geopolitical standpoint and a cyber threat standpoint is going to help you. So knowing what threat actors, having that contextualized data is going to really, really help you decide which ones you need to secure first.
Awesome. I appreciate the context. I think, real world examples always bring it to life. We wanted to walk through a table talk exercise to kind of showcase the foundations of it. But the reality is, again, the attackers are people at the end of the day with behaviors and motivations that change and are influenced. And so having that view in mind while going through prioritization is important, and it's helpful as we venture into this new scale of defense. As we look at what that means in our actions and across the board, when we're diving into continuous visibility, I just want to break down kind of all of maybe some best practices we've seen across our teams and things to focus on and think about as a recap before we go into demo here. But continuous visibility is helping you really to map together that extended attack surface. And so direct extension into your third, fourth, and nth parties. We see these vendors, again, should be monitored with the same level of scrutiny you would your own attack surface, because they are your attack surface. And we've seen that growing more and more. It also means really shifting towards that always on focus of monitoring, not just periodic audits. The world in which we live is so dynamic, and with AI assisted developments and processes and new models, that level of dynamic change is accelerating. I think before we would have said something like periodic audits. Once you do an audit and snapshot in time, it's probably a month and something might have changed. I think now it's probably going to be seconds, if not minutes. That's how quick and things are dynamic. So really focusing on shifting the priority to having the support of that continuous visibility will be critical. And as Emma just explained through working examples for us here, know what is exposed before the attackers do, but also, know their motivations there. And so that's the working exercise we just broke down, but really having that visibility into knowing where to focus based on exposure. And then again, we move into this middle column here about the threat-driven prioritization. And that's building a systematic approach across your program to marry this information together. The intelligence used to influence prioritization based on exposure, performance, and that business context, and then pairing that with the real world threat insight. Ask which of my critical vendors are currently under attack. I mean, that's the world that we're faced in. I think it's right to be focusing with that type of lens, to be thinking that that's the reality we're in, and how do we recover from that? Not just the what ifs, but where is it happening now? Same thing with, you think about the vulnerabilities. Where are these vulnerabilities exposed? Where is that happening now? No longer is it a what if scenario. And taking that approach is really leading with the threat mind in place. Lastly, again, we're talking about remediation. This is really where the AI assistants can help in terms of helping you reach beyond manual processes. That's the orchestration of the workflows so that we can respond to disclosures within minutes. And again, but I cannot emphasize enough the pillars leading up to this place. It's that automation should not replace the judgment. We can influence and we can infer and help to provide context across the ways, but it's fundamentally important that we have all of the right context feeding that acceleration and feeding all of the automation so that we just don't go through the process without the applied level of judgment as needed. So what I'd like to do next is I have a pre-recorded demo of some of the work that we are doing within the Bitsight platform to help our customers have access to AI-assisted agents to help you manage and work through specific use case-driven workflows to address common themes and practices across managing your digital supply chain. The one that this demo is about to go through will be about responding to a major security event. And it's very, I think, relevant to the discussion we just had and helping to showcase how we as Bitsight also want to show up with accelerated workflows with that context in place within the platform to help you defend against this type of future state. I'm going to show you a demo of work that is in development and future roadmap items, but it's on our roadmap this quarter. So we're excited to kind of work through that and release these types of workflows and then continue to add more and more to the capability. So I will let Chonglu stop sharing the screens if you don't mind, and I will take over and share the demo video. All right, here we go. All right, so when we start here, I'm going to start first within the Bitsight platform, and for this demo, I'll be within the portfolio dashboard. This is where many teams operate from today. This is the landing page within the product, and as you can see, there are many security events being surfaced in real time, and this is where the challenge begins. A lot of teams are under increasing amount of pressure to take action and understand what matters most, and like we talked about with AI-driven models, and mythos and other things happening in the threat landscape, it's making it faster and easier to discover and exploit vulnerabilities. The threat landscape is accelerating. Teams really need a faster way to understand exposure and prioritize what matters and to take action. That's where agent mode comes in. So directly from the dashboard, what we can do is navigate to our app switcher and go into agent mode. Now we're inside agent mode. You immediately feel the difference. What you'll see is you're in a workplace that is purpose-built around one simple idea. Instead of starting with data and visualizations, you're starting with an intent. You can see from this list, there's a group of purpose-built agents, each designed to help you complete a workflow. And it navigates you from insights, recommendations, to actions. This spans a variety of use cases across this security needs, such as automating vendor questionnaires, helping you prioritize attack vectors, discover external assets, build remediation roadmaps. For today's purpose, let's focus on security events, one of the most critical issues that we're faced with on a daily basis. Let's jump in and start that analysis. As soon as we start the analysis, the agent begins to work. The agent immediately identifies emerging security events that actually matter to us. This is based on the environment, assets, and vendor ecosystem. This is context specific to your organization. In this example, I've identified 3 different events that are most critical to you and your organization. And let's start the analysis directly to learn more. The analysis isn't just about flagging these issues, but it's really going much deeper. It's contextualizing that information with content-rich experiences. It's helping you understand threat intelligence, all of the information about how this vulnerability works, whether or not it's being actively exploited, what that threat actor activity looks like, the severity, the exploitability. And at the same time, it's mapping all of that information to your own organization and immediately showing your organization's impact, as well as the impact to your third-party ecosystem. So in the matter of seconds, you're able to understand the impact to you, your organization, and the real-world threat activity associated with this emerging event. The true factor as to what is the urgency in this event and why does that matter? With the click of a button, you can turn this insight into an action. and jump right into response actions. The agent quickly outlines a list of different response actions for you to coordinate across different teams. Here we can talk about different options for you to work with your SecOps teams and helping to address this issue, deploy different rules within your own perimeter, help to contain issues, initiate different threat hunting activities, looking for compromise indicators of compromise across your systems, enable vendor outreach, and help to manage internal tasks and alignments across your teams. For this demo, let's jump into the vendor outreach. One of the most burdensome tasks about connecting with all of your different vendors and making sure they have the immediate response to you and information that they need to help you understand what's happening. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Again, my agent has crafted all of the message to be sent to the vendors, provided evidence of the impact for these vendors, and quickly teed up the communication to all of the vendors that are impacted to issue out this outreach directly in platform and send bulk EBAs for all the impacted vendors. The one click of a button, I can send all of that outreach. All of the vendors have been now notified and are immediately contacted with follow-up items. Similar to how this agent has just initiated actions across the vendor outreach channel, the agent is able to take action across those internal tasks, as well as SecOps coordination. Finally, at the end, the agent's able to summarize progress at any point in time, generates a complete real-time view of everything that has happened, helping you understand, again, why the security event matters, what those threat intelligence insights look like, and help you understand what actions have been taken, what vendor outreach has happened, the tasks, the workflows. Any point in time, you have immediate visibility into the ongoing response efforts to this critical event. Provides next steps for how to continue to address this event within your ecosystem and coordination across different teams. All right, I'm gonna pause there. The rest of the demo brings you back to the agent view there. But as I mentioned before, I wanted to highlight some of the upcoming work that we have to help teams, again, operate at the speed with automation, bringing Bitsight's data into your more accessible for you as a client and a customer to harness all of that information in a contextualized workflow and being able to defend or respond to major security events, as well as many other risk related workflows across your program. And so I wanted to demonstrate that. I saw a handful of questions come through, so I will address also that what I demoed today is a visionary roadmap item that we're actively working on right now. And the release cadence will be a subset of those types of workflows within the experience, starting with a vendor risk analysis summary first and an organization risk analysis summary first to help you really focus your attention on what matters most. And then from there, we'll continue to grow into workflows like you just saw in demonstration with actionability and connected experiences across the different types of processes that you need as an organization.
Amazing. Just give me really appreciate that. I know folks are pretty excited about this. We will take questions from the chat in a minute, but just really quick. So key takeaways from the content that Amanda and Emma are sharing today is really, while frontier AI models like Mythos is really accelerating attack in the way that it makes vulnerabilities to discovery to exploitation time really short, almost to zero, there is a way for us as defenders to move smartly with speed and with accurate precision, given the threat, given the intelligence that we have as of today. Secondly, getting prepared for your program is really thinking about this mind shift from third-party risk only to a supply chain resilience. And Amanda has said this multiple times during the webinar, is that your supply chain is your parameter of attack. So treat it like one. What's a quick thing that you can do from today? One, some of the discoveries and insights are included, that Emma covered today, are included in State of the Underground 2026 report. So feel free to take a look at the docs tab on your right. Map your critical vendors, because that's where your starting point for all the conversation and sort of prioritizations that we're going to do. And then if you want to see Bitsight in action, take a closer look. The talk to a Bitsight expert bottom on the top right is the best way to get there. Now, let's take questions. And I would invite Amanda and Emma to be on mute if you could. Whoa, we got a lot of questions here. So I think, and bear with me, do know that if we didn't get to your question live, we'll definitely make sure to follow up. So no worries either way. I'll do my best to cover them. I think we had one about from Ernesto. How quickly in real time are the attacks being seen? I think this is about monitoring. Emma, do you want to talk a little bit on this in terms of like how we capture those things through threat intelligence?
Yeah, we have near real-time monitoring. We are in a lot of closed chat rooms. If you've been on the dark web lately, a lot of the marketplaces, like the Russian marketplaces, now require invite or a password to get in. And we are in many of those chat rooms, many of those dark web marketplaces and forums like Dread, where threat actors are actively discussing their exploits. Threat actors like to talk, and they like to talk about who they're targeting and their successful exploits. So there's no shortage of information to track who threat actors are targeting, what they're going to go after next. And then we take that and we put that into the portal and send alerts based on that of, hey, we heard Scattered Spider talking about targeting your vendor in this industry, or we heard Clop talking about this. So we're actively monitoring what threat actors are talking about and who they're planning to go after, and also what they're studying in terms of the security landscape and AI.
The next question is from Grace. Grace, let me know if I read this correctly. I feel it's a question. So I think this was doing Amanda on the slide to talk about TPRM in action, and Grace is asking, so are we suggesting that, is it about companies that need to integrate InfoSec or Cyber SME into the vendor management programs, or should we be using AI automation to extract dynamic visibility and harmonize data based on the threat exposure? I think this is more to Amanda. Would you like to cover that?
Yes, I'd like to say both. I think when we think about what does it mean to operate more of this threat-like-minded experience that we see in the attack space, it's about making sure you have tight partnership with the SecOps teams and the cyber teams. I think that the GRC side and the SecOps side bring different lenses into the same problem, where your SecOps organization is going to have more of an understanding, likely, of the understanding across the attack space, what is happening in the threat landscape. Whereas on the vendor management side and the GRC side, you have a lot of information about the criticality of that vendor. And so by integrating those teams together, you're going to have a lot more shared knowledge to paint that bigger picture. Now, how you can get there too, you could absolutely utilize AI automation to help extract more of that dynamic visibility and bring those data sets together. But at the end of the day, I think it's a bit of both. I think fundamentally it's supposed to make sure that those teams are operating as in sync as possible is the foundation. And I would say the tooling is a choice of orchestration. I know, Emma, we've done a previous webinar actually where you and Ryan came together from our internal GRC team talking about these two worlds coming together. I don't know if you have a perspective on that from a high level too.
Yeah, it's super important to make sure your teams are working together. One of the things I say is in security, it's all of us against threat actors. So communicating with either your own team or other security professionals, and discussing what threat actors are doing and how you can protect yourself is going to be super, super important. Making sure you're on the same page with your GRC teams in terms of knowing what are we going to do if we have a critical vulnerability? What's our game plan? How quickly are we able to get the SOC up and moving to remediate this concern?
Nice. Next question from Itoro. I'll add a little bit to that. So Itoro is asking, how are we able to map those threat actors to industries, and can Bitsight provide such information? And maybe if they want to know more, where can they find out? That's the part that I add. This is probably for Emma.
Yeah. So threat actors tend to stick to a core group of industries that they're interested in targeting, either because of their ideological, geopolitical views, or because they've had success with those industries in the past, or they know those industries are more likely to pay or tend to have a lot of data that they can use to extort them. So if it's a geopolitically motivated industry, they're going to go for stuff that can cause massive disruptions to try and prove their point from a political standpoint or an ideological standpoint. And then from a ransomware perspective, they're looking at the industries that they know are critical and that are more likely to pay. So they're looking at telecommunications, because think about cell phone providers. How much information do we give them when we get a new cell phone, or how much information are on our devices in general? So groups like Scattered Spider that tend to target telecommunications because of the SIM swapping and because of all the PII they can get from that, tend to stick with that because they've had success. So threat actors like to talk on the dark web, and they like to tell you who they're targeting and why they're targeting it. So they're pretty open about what they're doing and who they're interested in. And so just tracking the different threat actors and knowing, okay, well, I know Akira is known to target manufacturing because they're looking for really disruptive attacks. Or I know that CLOP is more politically motivated, so they're going to target my critical infrastructure more often.
Awesome. We have time for one more question, and this is for Amanda. And sorry, I'm going to give you a loaded question. A lot of folks are asking in terms of availability of the agent that you just shared. So please give folks a sense of, like, is it a paid, or how are you going to access and when? And then this is also connect to, I think, George's question of do you have plans to improve the reporting section using AI to get more useful information? Take it away.
All right, awesome. So what I demoed today will be released in what I'd call a phased approach, meaning when I was showing you the different orchestrated work streams or use cases that the agent can help you assist with, we'll start with a handful and then continue to develop new ones as we go. And the first ones are aimed to be available in August, and they'll start again with the helping you to prioritize critical issues with a given vendor and helping prioritize critical issues within your own ecosystem. Your own infrastructure first. So elevating that data on your behalf. And then from there, we'll continue to build out those more tightly orchestrated workflows. This is something that will be available if you've if you've purchased continuous monitoring or SPM. Beyond that, when it comes to agents and MCP utilization and access to things like that within our organization, that we are working through a commercial model to build out as clients adapt it, but there will be a base offering that everyone has access to. And then I can't believe I remember this, but the report question is, yes, we do recognize that reporting within the platform is one in which we want to drive more flexibility around utilizing AI. So that is part of the plan. I don't have any discrete timelines on that, but we recognize that as the strategy and one we want to go after with these types of workflows to help you generate views into the data across your platform data that you have access to.
Good job answering all the loaded questions. And what I'm hearing is, as soon as it becomes available, the best opportunity for customers to leverage it, right? As long as they have continuous monitoring or SPM product access. Looks like we're on time. Really appreciate both of your insights, Amanda, Emma, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will follow up. You will get access to the link of this recording. If you asked a question and was not addressed during the live time, you will have follow up and ask your Bitsight rep about what we can help you today. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to see you next time.